Why are so many men expecting princess treatment? Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to talk about the phenomenon that I think a lot of people are noticing is that there's a lot of men in the world that are expecting princess treatment and are kind of expecting to be kind of treated like the woman in their relationship and not stepping up into their role as a man. And there's a lot of arguments as to why that is. So I'm just going to go into a few ideas I have about why it seems like men nowadays are so into getting the princess treatment. So there are a lot of men out there and their entire podcast dedicated to the idea that it is women's fault, that everything is women's fault, and that it is feminism's fault for just about everything that exists in the world, which is really kind of ironic because women have never historically ever had enough power to make that kind of an impact on the world. And I'm not saying that feminism hasn't had a drastic difference on the way the world is, and there haven't been aspects of it too that have been positive and negative, and I have a whole video talking about feminism and femininity that goes into that much deeper. But the reality is women respond to how men show up. So the concept of feminism doesn't happen if it's not a response to how men are showing up. So men can sit there and blame women or blame feminism all they want, but the reality is women respond to how men show up. It's actually biology. When women get masculine, as men love to call them, or women get combative or women get guarded, it's a response to how men are showing up in society. When you have a society where you have men that are showing up in a very grounded, stable, and safe way, women don't have to feel combative. They don't have to feel guarded. They can naturally relax. And I'm not saying that they're just necessarily going to conform and that every woman is going to become a traditional homemaker or a trad wife or anything like that, because I don't think it's everybody's path. But women are naturally going to show up in a more relaxed, feminine way when you have men showing up in society in a safe and healthy masculine. Like, those energies complement each other very well. However, the more that you have men who are not stepping into a healthy masculine, they're either in a very unhealthy masculine, or in the case of the princess treatment, they're kind of in a very unhealthy feminine energy. Women are going to respond to that by being in their own masculine energy, typically a very guarded or even sometimes wounded masculine energy. That's just the way that polarity works, and I have a lot of other videos on here about polarity, so I'm not going to dive into that too much in this video. And it's ironic that you have a lot of guys in society, I would say, like, you know, your podcast bros or your social media personalities or kind of your male leaders in society that are touting masculinity. They're screaming about how they want to be masculine or that men are masculine or things like that, and they're actually asking for princess treatment. Like, they're asking to be treated like women would be treated traditionally. Like, they're asking to be the woman in the relationship while screaming and crying about masculinity, which is the irony of the whole like alpha male podcast bro mentality. My audience is primarily women, so I realize this is mostly going to be received by women, so I'm going to talk about this kind of as more an informative video for women, because I do think there's a lot of women who are frustrated, confused that so many men are looking for this princess treatment. So I'm going to kind of address this as more of an informational video towards women. If there are men watching, welcome. I understand that there's going to be a lot of guys who don't think that a woman should be explaining to them about masculinity, and I do firmly believe that men need to teach other men how to step into their masculine energy. Historically, that's always been the case. However, we all understand in society what masculine energy is. We know what's masculine and what's not, and women in particular are designed to sense if a man is in a safe masculine energy or an unsafe energy. We know in our bodies, we can feel it in our bodies. For most women, and I think many women are disconnected from their bodies, but women that are connected to their bodies can usually sense it. Like, if a man is unstable, erratic, he's in a very, you know, wounded masculine energy of being very controlling, abusive, we tend to tense up, like our body tenses up. Now, there's some women that kind of get turned on by that tension because they maybe have past traumas or things like that, but generally speaking, there's a tension there. If a man is in very like erratic, wounded feminine energy, which is usually where you get the princess treatment thing, women will also feel like they have to put up their either a masculine shield, or sometimes that turns into mothering of like, I have to mother this man. Man in wounded feminine energy often feels very childlike, and I'll get into the reasons for that in a minute. But women respond to how men show up. So if a man is showing up in either a very unhealthy masculine energy or a very wounded feminine energy, a woman is going to feel that in her body. Like, she'll sense it. Some women are disconnected from that, But I think when you're a woman, you can connect to that in your body, you will be able to feel whether or not a man is safe or unsafe. Unfortunately, as women, we have a lot of disconnection from our bodies. We are taught not to listen to our bodies. We're taught not to listen to our intuition. So it is difficult for many women to do that. But if you really tap into it as a woman, you'll be able to tell. And then when a man is actually in a safe, stable, grounded masculine energy, as women, it will feel very relaxing to the nervous system. It will feel very stable and safe. And that's usually when, as women, we can relax. Some women have blockages to that, but it tends to be easier for women to relax. It's a complicated thing that I'm kind of summing up in just brief terms, but I want women to be aware why men tend to be in this kind of like princess era. But I also want women to understand that I'm not making this video to justify that behavior in any way. I'm also not making this video to tell women that like it's their responsibility to fix it. It's men's responsibility to fix the stuff within themselves. As women, it's our responsibility to fix what we need to fix within ourselves. Also bearing in mind that we're going to respond to how men show up. So the more that we have unhealthy, unstable men in our lives, the harder that's going to be for us as women. I just think it can help women make better decisions with our lives and things like that. So that's really the main reason why I'm making this video. So let's get into what princess treatment actually is. Princess treatment in men is typically wounded feminine energy in a man. Wounded feminine energy in either men or women tends to be the I want someone to rescue me. I want someone to take care of me. I don't have any strength within myself, so I'm going to rely on other people to take care of me. It tends to be the perpetual victim. That's wounded feminine energy. Healthy feminine energy is not like that. I have a lot of videos on here about, you know, healthy feminine energy, but wounded feminine energy tends to be, you can kind of think of it a little bit like the princess waiting to be rescued. And that's wounded feminine energy in anybody. But we are seeing a huge phenomenon in wounded feminine energy in men. Now, there's a lot of people who believe historically that children, when they're born, tend to embody a lot of feminine energy. They tend to be very connected to their bodies. They operate a lot on instinct, because as children, that's all you have is sort of your instincts. You know, as you're learning and growing, you tend to be more in the body because your mind hasn't fully developed yet, so you're still learning about the outside world and things like that. So children tend to embody a lot of feminine energy. If it feels good, I do it. If it doesn't feel good, I don't do it. Like, you know, that kind of thing. Children tend to be undisciplined and things like that. Children tend to have more feminine energy, which is natural. Now, most cultures believe that women are initiated into their sort of adult feminine energy by nature. Like, nature initiates us as women. Nature gives us our menstrual cycles because women are much more connected to nature and the cycles of nature. It is also important to have what I call the wise woman archetype, the feminine elders in society that help to guide women in life and things like that. And that's one thing that it's probably for a whole other video, but I definitely think that we as a society shun that. We tend to teach young girls not to trust older women, and not to say that all older women should be trusted. Society loves to just shame and judge older women and convince young girls not to listen to older women because society, primarily the men in society, want to have control over young women. They don't want older women to share their wisdom with them. I think it's a control tactic. That's for a whole other video, but it's not necessarily the wise women in society that actually initiate women into motherhood. Nature does that, but it's the wise women in society that help to guide young women into womanhood in that sense. And ideally, unfortunately, we don't really have a society that is conducive to this, because a lot of young girls, especially nowadays, are very much pushed into a very masculine energy, and some end up in very wounded feminine energy. Healthy feminine energy, unfortunately, in our society is not that common. Hopefully it'll become more common, but it actually is unfortunately not as common in our current society. But nature initiates women into that adulthood of shifting them into their feminine energy with the help of the wise women elders in society. But most cultures believe that while women get naturally initiated into womanhood by nature, essentially, that the way that boys transition from boyhood to manhood is through masculine leadership. Nature doesn't do that for them. Men have to be taught to step into their masculine energy, and they have to earn it. Masculine energy is meant to be earned. If you think about it, men can be emasculated, but women can't be effeminated. Now, women can suppress their feminine energy, they can get disconnected from their feminine energy, but that's usually a trauma response from society, whereas for men, them getting emasculated is them not actually earning their masculinity or their masculine energy, because men have to earn that. And that's actually part of the experience. Is like earning that is actually part of the experience of stepping into your masculine energy. It's facing challenges, it's learning discipline, it's stepping into that, achieving a goal, things like that. Like those are things that men have to achieve. Men are not just born masculine. The way that men develop this is actually through like healthy masculine leadership in healthy masculine elders in a society. Fathers and father figures are absolutely important, but that's typically not enough alone to transition a man into a healthy masculine energy. Usually it needs to be, it's a tribe. It takes a village to raise a child, right? There are actually a lot of research studies that show that it's not necessarily just if each individual child has a father figure, it's the number of father figures in a society. Kind of makes a certain amount of sense, because if you think about it, if you as a boy grow up in a household where you have a father, but you're surrounded by other kids that don't have father figures, you're going to be negatively influenced by those kids that don't have father figures, and like your father probably isn't going to be able to be a father figure to everybody in society. Whereas if say you have one child that for some reason doesn't have a father, but you have a whole community of like boys with fathers, then that one child that doesn't have a father is going to be surrounded by other kids that have father figures, and you're going to have a lot of fathers like involved in the community, involved with, you know, activities with young boys and things. And as long as the child that doesn't have a father is included in that, he can have a lot of healthy masculine role models so that he can transition from boyhood to manhood. And so it's not necessarily the individual fathers, which are a factor, and I'm not diminishing that that's very important to have a healthy masculine father in the household. Not just a father, but a healthy masculine father in the household. But it's also how many healthy masculine leaders are in the community. And I would actually go farther than just the community. Now, you know, I mean, obviously there's the media, and the media has been around for a while, but now with social media, I think the influence of healthy masculine role models globally is a factor. Like, it's a huge factor. I have a video going deeper into, I have several videos, but I have one video specifically talking about like healthy and unhealthy masculine leadership. And as I've talked about many times before, I think one of the problems we have now is that we have a serious lack of healthy masculine leadership. That's in father figures, but I think in society in general. And anytime you have a lack of something that is essential to a society, it leaves an opening for really bad people to fill that space. That's where you get a lot of these, the Andrew Tates of the world and the podcast bros, and a lot of these guys that are just, they're scam artists. They're scam artists. Some of them I would even say probably sociopaths. They're trying to take advantage of men and take advantage of that hole that men have in their life of desperately looking for a father figure or some kind of a masculine role model. I think men inherently want that stuff. Like, they want a male leader who will guide them. It's the same reason why a lot of boys get into gangs and things like that. Boys want healthy masculine leadership. I think inherently they know that they need that. But if they don't have access to that, they're gonna find it in the wrong people. And I mean, that's human nature. You know, I mean, it's the same reason why oftentimes when women want love or they want acceptance, or, you know, they have their daddy issues or they're looking for a father figure or something, they can search for that in the wrong people. Like, if we lack something in our life that is something that we need inherently, we're gonna search for it and oftentimes find it in the wrong people. I mean, if you were to ask me what the overwhelming reason why we have so many men that are not stepping into their masculine energy, so many men that are looking for princess treatment, so many men that are just, you know, man children, and so many men that are kind of stepping into their feminine era and stuff like that. I mean, I would say that the lack of healthy masculine leadership is overwhelmingly the #1 problem. I think there's other things going on here, but I think that that's the overwhelming problem. We do have a lot of single parent households. Mostly in those situations, they're single mother households. We also have a phenomenon of married single mothers who are basically, you know, women who are married and, you know, have husbands, and there is a father that maybe like lives in the home, but he's not showing up as a father figure. He's not showing up as a father, as a husband. He's not showing up the way that he needs to. So the woman is basically, you know, she might legally be married, but she's still having to do all of these things on her own. She's basically having to operate like she's a single woman. And I understand that there's aspects to it, like if you are a married single mother but you have a husband who's bringing home, you know, a paycheck or something, then that is different than a woman who's just a single mother who maybe she's not even getting child support or something like that. Like, obviously there's variations to the extremes in these situations. However, when you have a household that for whatever reason, the child is primarily only being raised by the mother, so the mother is really the only one who's actually present in the child's life, it can be really easy for the child to put all the blame on the mother for anything that might go wrong, because they're the face that's present to them. The reality of the situation is women can only be as good a mother as the situation that the father provides for them will allow. You know, this is something that I think I've learned over the course of my life, and I've witnessed it personally and in a lot of different ways in a lot of different areas. I'm probably gonna get some pushback from this, but I'm just gonna say this. If your mother was not the mother that you wanted her to be or the mother that you needed her to be, it's because your father didn't show up as the man that she needed in order to become that mother. I mean, there might be some exceptions, you know, illness or things like that that may be out of people's control, but generally speaking, if we're just talking about how a mother showed up, if she wasn't the mother that you needed her to be, it's because your father did not show up as the man that he needed to be to allow her to do that. But it's easy to put the blame on the mother because she's the one who's there. This is particularly extreme in boys, where there are a lot of boys right now that are operating from a lot of deep hatred towards women, and a lot of that is unresolved issues towards their mother. And a lot of those issues that they have towards their mother is really anger at their father for not showing up as the man that he should have been, and they're projecting that on their mother because they're not ready to accept their father's shortcomings. They say a lot in psychology that the saddest day in a man's life is when he realizes his father isn't perfect, because it is normal a lot of times for children, particularly boys, to put their father up on a pedestal. And this can even happen in a father that isn't present, because sometimes as children you kind of can project a fantasy onto your father if he's not around. This isn't obviously all the time, but very often that's common, and it's particularly common in boys. They project this kind of idealistic kind of superhero quality onto their father, and then when they realize their father is human, and all our fathers are human, right? So like, this is not necessarily about a man being perfect, but oftentimes it's very difficult for boys to accept the shortcomings of their father, because then you have to accept their humanity. You know, ideally, those flaws in him are just simple human flaws that, you know, we all have as humans, because none of us are perfect. However, if you do have a father who is a horribly flawed person to the point where he's actually shown up in a way that did not allow your mother to become the mother that she needed to be, or that you needed her to be, or he didn't show up as the father that you needed because of his character or addictions, abuse, other issues and stuff, it can be really difficult for particularly boys, I mean this can happen to girls too, but particularly for boys, to accept that about their father. So oftentimes that anger, resentment, frustration they have towards their father, they then project on their mother, and then that anger and frustration gets projected onto all women that they come in contact with. Again, I know it's gonna be controversial, but I do think that a lot of the anger and hatred and frustration that boys have towards women, like you see it in a lot of these podcast bros and things like that, it's anger and frustration that they feel towards their mother that is basically redirected anger that they have towards their father, but they can't accept their father's flaws, so they're putting those flaws on their mother, or they're putting the blame on their mother for how their father was showing up, because they're just not ready to admit that their father is flawed. Because for one thing, if you as a boy admit your father is flawed, you have to accept the flaws in humanity within yourself, which is actually kind of gets into narcissism. When these boys don't have initiation processes in society for them to go from boyhood to manhood, and to teach boys to step into their masculine energy, to earn their masculinity, and you don't have leadership, you don't have initiation processes, you don't have a system for transitioning these boys to men, what happens is you end up with boys that stay eternally children, which I would say is probably the biggest phenomenon we have right now in society. It's the biggest problem. We have a bunch of like fully grown men walking around and they're still children, because most children, when they're children, embody a lot of feminine energy, which is natural in children. Those boys never really grow up into their masculine energy, so they keep their sort of childlike feminine energy, and as they get older and become adults, it tends to be very wounded, because grown adult men are not, I mean, it's healthy to have a connection to both your masculine and your feminine energies for both people. But for most males, you're gonna be masculine at your core. And having grown adult men operating from feminine energy, which often becomes wounded feminine energy as they become adults because they don't know how to become men. They don't know how to transition into manhood. They don't have the guidance. They don't have the systems in place for that to happen. So most men are gonna pick one of two options. Some will pick both. They're either gonna stay in this very wounded feminine energy, which tends to be more of the princess treatment aspect. So they want to be the woman. They resent women for getting to be women because they're still in their feminine energy, so they're resenting women for being feminine. They don't want women to be feminine because like they want to be the feminine ones because they haven't figured out how to become masculine. And or they tend to be what I would say very toxically masculine or wounded masculine, where they start doing things that are not really masculinity, but they start exhibiting very toxic behavior in the false name of being masculine. Like just walking around and just, you know, beating somebody up who's smaller and weaker than them to make themselves feel more important, you know, or just, you know, bullying people that are weaker than them just because it'll make them feel like more of a man or something like that. Or you're just getting involved in like really dangerous activities because it makes them feel like more of a man, but it's just superficial masculinity. It's not like true masculinity. And I have other videos talking about toxic versus healthy masculinity and stuff like that. But this is kind of what you have, is you have these boys who are kind of in this weird space of like, you know, they're lost boys. I mean, it's kind of like Peter Pan. I mean, they're literally lost boys. I have such a Tinkerbell complex. I actually read a book somewhere about a Tinkerbell complex and I was just like, oh my God, that's so me. Yeah, so you have this phenomenon of, you know, these boys who are now fully grown men who are still acting like little boys. I had this weird epiphany, which I thought was interesting, is that when we have a society where women are rejecting traditional feminine roles, women tend to be very vocal about it. Like they tend to tell everybody. Like if a woman can't cook, she will brag to everybody about how she can't cook. Like it's like a badge of honor for her. Whereas when men don't take on traditionally masculine roles, it tends to be more like on the down low, like they don't want people to know, which is why you'll see some guys that like aren't gonna pay on a date, but they want the woman to give him like her credit card or give him the money so he can look like he's paying. This isn't universal. There are some guys who just don't care, but I know I had an ex who, we didn't have a house, so we didn't have a yard, but we were talking about like when we got a house and had a yard. He made it very clear he was not going to do yard work. So I remember saying to him, I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to do yard work. And he was just going to roll his eyes. So I said that one time in public. I think we were like in a Home Depot looking for something. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to learn how to use a lawnmower because since you're not going to mow the lawn, I'm going to have to do it. And he was like, he's like, oh my God, people could hear you. Like, how dare you? And I was like, well, you made it clear you weren't going to do yard work. So who's going to do it? It would have to be me, you know? Shocking that that relationship didn't last. I've always had to be the one to shovel snow in all my past relationships. And I find that so ironic. It's like I live in New England, so you'd think I'd be dating guys that knew how to shovel snow. No. That's gonna lead me into another topic in a minute, but just, yeah. I would also say that little boys that never get initiated into their masculine energy, so they stay little boys even as grown adults, exhibit a lot of narcissistic behavior. Because in a lot of psychology, children tend to be more narcissistic because, you know, their world is sort of revolving around them, you know, if you're still learning. Not to say that, I'm not saying all children are narcissists or anything like that or whatever, but I actually think that that's connected to why so many men nowadays exhibit a lot of narcissistic behavior. I know guys are gonna argue, well, women are narcissists too. Overwhelmingly, narcissism is overwhelmingly affects males. And I think a lot of the narcissistic behavior, I'm not saying that every man is a narcissist, but a lot of the narcissistic behavior that we're seeing in men nowadays is partly tied to the fact that they're children. Like they're little boys, you know, and they're undisciplined. They don't like being disciplined. They're stubborn. They're acting like toddlers. That behavior in an adult is gonna feel very narcissistic, whether that person actually is a narcissist or not. You know, as a child, it's normal to have someone cater to you to take care of you. I mean, you're a child, you don't have the resources to do it yourself. So if you have a grown adult man who has not stepped out of childhood into manhood, it kind of makes sense why he's expecting everybody in his life, particularly the women in his life, he's just turning them into another version of his mother and expecting them to take care of him, for them to pamper him, because children inherently should be taken care of. Like they should be having all their needs met for them because they're children. They can't rely on themselves. But when you have boys who are not transitioning into men, it kind of makes sense why so many of them want women who are essentially going to be their mothers, because they don't want to have to take care of themselves. And they're not stepping into that role. A lot of men in marriages, like when you see married couples, so a lot of what these children are witnessing in like their parents' relationships or in other relationships is a lot of these, you know, the husbands are just a child and the woman is mothering them. Like I literally for most of my life thought that was normal. I just thought that it was normal for men to be children, and if you married a man, it was normal for you to have to basically become their mother. I just thought that was normal because that's what I grew up with. That's what pretty much every relationship I'd ever seen was like. It wasn't until literally just a few years ago, and I'm in my 40s, that I started to learn more about like masculine feminine dynamics, realize that that's not healthy. It's common, it's very common, but it's not healthy. But I gotta be honest with you, when we start wondering like why so many women, you know, don't want to get married and so many women are divorcing and things like that, a lot of women are just tired of having to mother grown men. A lot of it just has to do with the fact that these guys just, they have not stepped from boyhood to manhood, and that behavior has become very normalized in society. And I do think there is a sense that, you know, there are a lot of women that meet men that want to act masculine, but again, it's that fake masculine of that like fake, that like toxic behavior in the false name of proving their masculinity, so that a lot of women find, you know, the concept of masculinity unsafe because all they've seen is it being a toxic behavior, and they haven't actually experienced healthy masculine energy, because unfortunately healthy masculine energy in men is just so rare today. And I wish it was more common, and I think that's where we kind of got into the situation we are in now, where there are so few healthy masculine men in the world. I also find it funny, like I have a video talking about kind of these masculine pick-me girls, you know, your pearls. I've seen Candace Owens do this, where these women are like fighting for masculine men. Like, I have to fight to protect masculine men, when it's like men being masculine inherently don't need women to protect them. Like, if a man is in masculine energy, he doesn't need women to protect him. Like, he can protect himself, and he should be protecting women. And I don't think that they get the irony there. If you as a man need a woman to protect your masculinity, like if you as a man are like so afraid that a woman is going to emasculate you, or you need women to tiptoe around you so they don't emasculate you, you're not in your grounded, healthy masculine energy. Like, a woman should not have to tiptoe around you. A woman should not have to like try not to emasculate you. If a woman can emasculate you, you're not in a healthy, grounded masculine energy. Plain and simple. Because if you actually were in a grounded, healthy masculine energy, there's nothing a woman could do that could actually emasculate you. And a woman isn't gonna want to emasculate you. The reason why women want to emasculate men is usually if they're sensing that like their masculine energy, so to speak, is actually just like toxic behavior that men are using in the false name of masculinity. I was also seeing a lot of things in like social media about this kind of like American men versus Russian men thing. And I wanted to talk about that for a second. I have a lot of thoughts on that. If you're not familiar with this phenomenon, what was happening is that there was, I don't know if it was just one person or it was a lot of people or something, but there were these videos that were showing up that were these like man on the street interviews. You basically had somebody asking American men versus Russian men like the same question and seeing their reaction. A lot of it was usually with male-female interactions, like asking American men versus Russian men, like who should pay on a date, who should pay the bills in a relationship, like should you go 50-50 in a relationship, and like various things like that. Not surprising, most of the Russian men were saying that they would pay on the date, that they were not looking to go 50-50, that they would financially provide for a woman and things like that. And most of the American men are kind of like, no, we can split the bill, and like we can split everything, and we can go 50-50 and blah 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 and all this kind of stuff. First of all, we have to take some of these man on the street interviews with a grain of salt, because obviously the person that's doing the interviewing is probably going to be somewhat biased, and the way it gets edited is going to be somewhat biased to like prove your point. It's very easy to make these things sound a certain way, so I don't want people to get to assume this is all fact, right? Or just assume that, okay, all American men think this way and all Russian men think this way. I also would encourage everybody, particularly women, to remember a man's words mean nothing. Men are action. So what a man says does not mean anything if his actions don't back it up. So there are a lot of men out there that will say things like, no, I would provide for a woman, I would never go 50-50, I would pay on a date, things like that. but do their actions back it up? Because a lot of men can say the right things, especially if they know what the like right answer is, but it may not actually be what happens in practice. So I don't want women to get too like, oh my God, these Russian men are so great, or these types of men are so much better than this type of man, or something like that, just because they say what you want to hear. I remember having a conversation, this was years ago, back when I was doing stand-up comedy, so I was around guys all the time, and I remember going through this breakup with this guy, and I was sitting around talking to a bunch of guys I was working with, and I was like talking to them about the situation and how I was just so devastated that like I felt like everything he told me didn't end up being true. And these guys are all looking at me like, yeah, because he told you what you wanted to hear. And they're looking at me like I'm the one at fault here. And I was like, well, yeah, but it's called what you want to hear for a reason. Like, am I going to date someone who's saying what I don't want to hear? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, obviously, I'm going to go out with the guy that's saying the things that I want. But these guys were just sort of like, you know, why would you fall for that? Like, why would you buy it? It's like, well, because for most of us, I think, I mean, I inherently want to believe what people say are true, but unfortunately, I've just learned time and time and time again, particularly with men, like what comes out of their mouth means nothing. You have to watch their actions. Now, if a man's words and actions don't link up, that's oftentimes a red flag, but you always have to trust his actions more than you trust his words. Because words can mean nothing. Men will just say things, and if their actions don't back it up, the words mean nothing. I've learned that lesson the hard way so many times. But I was noticing an interesting phenomenon with this kind of American men versus Russian men thing. Just in the video, and again, they're selecting people to make their point. They're selecting people for the video. Like, I'm sure that this is edited to look a certain way and things like that. But if you just notice the level of testosterone difference in the Russian men versus the American men. And some of these things are genetic, I'm sure. But like the chiseled jaws in the Russian men. And not that these men are necessarily like that much leaner than American men. I mean, they were a little bit in some cases. Some of them looked a little bit more like they worked out more than some of the American men or things like that, but like not overwhelmingly. It wasn't like all the Russian men looked like they were like professional bodybuilders and the American men looked like couch potatoes. Like I don't think it was that dramatic in their activity levels. And some of it I'm sure is like genetics and things like that, but the Russian men had an air of testosterone about them, whereas the American men did not. It got me thinking, and this is a theory. I've been toying with this theory for a while, and I've tried to do some research, but I don't think that there's enough research on this topic to get a clear-cut answer. And I also think that there's a lot of people in industries that don't want this research done. So I don't know if this research will ever happen. But I have a theory. It makes too much sense. It answers too many questions to not be true. But I theorize that there is a direct correlation between the men that want princess treatment, that want the 50-50, that are not stepping into a traditional masculine role. There's a direct correlation between that and how much soy these men consume. And when I actually went and looked at like the soybean consumption based on countries, it backs it up. The Russian countries, places in Europe and stuff, like their soybean consumption is like almost nothing. The US is the second highest consumer of soy products. China being the highest, the US being second, and then there were a few other countries that were like up there, but like China and the US were like way above. Like, I know that there is a difference between the US soybean consumption and like the way that soybeans are processed and things like that, and probably the way that we eat them here in the US versus China. So in the US, it's primarily in soybean oil. Like, it's not like we're eating a pile of edamame. So I think like the dietary constraints with how we consume soy in America and China is probably different. We're overwhelmingly the consumers of soy products. In other places in the world, it's practically nothing. Like, there's a lot of like European countries where it's not even a thing. The first time I started getting into learning more about soy, I used to have awful acne. Like terrible, terrible acne. Everybody had some kind of theory about how to fix it. I was using all kinds of skincare stuff, and I was, you know, changing my diet. It was like, oh, stop eating dairy, or stop eating chocolate, or stop eating blah, 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 blah. I tried everything, you know, cutting all kinds of different food groups out, trying all kinds of different skincare products, all kinds of different treatments. I was even on like a prescription acne medication for a while. Yeah, I was trying to go on the pill to see if I could fix it. Like literally my acne was so bad. Like, it looked like my skin was rejecting me. Like, it was just so bad. And I cut soy out of my diet. Cleared up. I hardly ever get a pimple anymore. Like, every once in a while, but like hardly ever get a pimple anymore. Just from cutting out soy. Here in America, cutting soy out of your diet is almost impossible. Like, it's next to, you cannot eat out. You cannot actually eat out in a restaurant without consuming soy, because just about every restaurant uses soybean oil in some way. And to the point where I think that a lot of food companies, like if it's like less than a certain amount or something, like they don't even have to declare that they're using it. Basically, I cook for myself. I don't eat out anymore, and I have to be very, very selective over what I buy and what I purchase and what I consume, because it's literally hidden in everything. And I can tell now, like if I do go out to eat someplace, the next day I will get like a massive breakout. Like, it's just unbelievable. So like, I know that there's a correlation there, and that's just how it's affecting a woman. And I'm sure because where I get the acne is in areas that are very hormonal. Like, it's usually like a hormone based thing. So that's where I started to get more into the concept of being soy free and really focusing on that. And the more I started learning about it, and the more I started realizing that soy is pretty much just like pumping yourself full of estrogen, which for women is bad enough, because for women we get a lot of extra estrogen in our bodies and it can throw off our hormones a lot. And you know, women nowadays are notorious for having hormone issues. That said, for men, if you're consuming a lot of soy, and some of it is actually from like soy-based products, whether it be like sort of your fake meats or like soy sauce, or you know, like actually consuming like soy milk or things like that. Some of it is like directly from that, but also like if you as a man are like eating out a lot, you're especially like fast food places and things like that, your body is getting a ton of soy, which means you're pumping your body full of a lot of estrogen. You as a man are actually pumping your body full of a female hormone. You're making yourself into a woman. Is it any surprise that these men are also looking for princess treatment? And again, I don't know if anybody would actually do the research on this, because you know, the soybean companies are pretty powerful and make a lot of money, and there's a lot of restaurants. I mean, you know, there's a lot of ties to when a lot of restaurants started switching to using soybean oil, like especially McDonald's and things like that, and the obesity epidemic in America. Just for a note, for guys, affects men and women the same. In fact, statistically speaking, there are slightly more men that are obese in America than there are women. It's pretty even, but there's slightly more men. So the men that love to run around and complain about women being obese in America, newsflash, not a lot of in shape guys in America either. So just saying. But yeah, there are a lot of theories as to the timeline of when soybean oil was introduced in mass quantities in our food in America and the obesity epidemic, which kind of makes a certain amount of sense if you're just pumping people full of something that's actually screwing up their hormones, because a lot of our weight issues in society are related to hormone issues. There's other factors too as well, but you know, there's that. But I kind of started this theory because, you know, I live in New England. And I gotta be honest with you, there are not a lot of manly men in New England. Like in the course of my time in New England, and some of it may be the fields that I've been in, or, you know, just, you know, my own circle of the world or something. But like, I feel like even when I'm out, like even like guys that you see doing more like traditionally manly jobs, like they're not that manly. When I was younger, I feel like I used to see, like you'd see like road construction guys and you'd be like, oh, that's like a man. Whereas now you drive by road construction sites and you're just kind of like, really? You're doing road construction? That's weird. I don't know. And even like the home repair shows, like I used to watch HGTV a lot, I don't as much anymore, but like the only show I think that was based in New England primarily was like one in Maine. And the guys were all like, I mean, yeah, they could do the work and stuff, but they were kind of little wimpy looking guys. Whereas like men in more in the South, you would see like that would be a little bit more manly. But I also remember, like, I went up to Canada once. I've only traveled to Canada once, but I just remember like the Mounties in Canada. I actually had to stop and I had some issues getting into Canada. Nothing major, but I just had a few issues. And like the Mounties I was dealing with were like, they were wonderful. They were very nice. They were like men. Like they were like men. And then like coming back into America, like, and dealing with like the border guards who were pleasant enough. Like it was fine. Like I didn't have any issues getting back into America. But like the border guys were all kind of like, they weren't manly at all. Like they were like trying to act like they were tough guys, but they weren't like that like manly guy. Like, and I think about it too, because I'm thinking like New England and Canada, like they border each other. It's not that big a difference in climate and stuff. You know, and New England we have rough winters, so you would think that that would make men more manly and tough because, you know, I think oftentimes when guys are living in, you know, like more of a pampered, you know, place where like you never have questionable weather, men never have to shovel snow or things like that, like I can kind of see where guys would get a little bit lazy, and like that makes a certain amount of sense. But like living in New England where like, you know, you get winters and things like that, like you kind of expect men to be more manly, and I just wasn't seeing it. And I was like, but you know, there's a lot of guys that go vegan, there's a lot of guys that eat out. Like I think especially when you get into the cities and stuff, like you get a lot of guys who are consuming a lot of like soy-based products, either like specifically like things like soy milk or, you know, fake meats or things like that, but also just like soybean oil in their fast food and things like that. I think there's a correlation between men getting wimpier, and Canada does not have nearly the soy consumption that America does. I actually was trying to look up soy consumption in each state in America, and I couldn't find the specific like information about that. I could find like the states that were producing the most soybean oil, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the ones that are consuming it the most. But if you just look at countries, and like the fact that we're looking at countries like Russia, and like we're looking at the men there and how they're much more like manly, and they're like, I'll take care of my woman and things like that. And even like you look at some other countries that like don't have the same soybean oil consumption that we do, the men are a lot more manly, which that gets into the whole passport bro conversation, and I have a video about passport bros that pissed off a lot of guys, but I stand by what I said, is that there's a lot of men who want to put up on a pedestal like going to another country and finding a woman in another country, so like she'll be so much more feminine. It's like, yeah, because look at the men they're around in their country, they're more masculine. So if you as a guy and you're like wimpy American, I want to go 50-50, I want the princess treatment or whatever, you go to another country, like some women might marry you because they might, I think in other countries, in some countries, especially poorer countries, I think a lot of times they think that Americans just naturally have more money. But a lot of those women there are gonna look at you like, okay, I could find a manly man in my country and that's why she's more feminine. They're gonna get into a relationship with you if you stay the same and you stay your kind of like soybean princess treatment man-child. That woman, even if she will marry you because maybe she thinks that it's a way to get to America, or maybe it's a way to get a green card, or you know, maybe she thinks that you have money or you may have more resources than maybe the men in her surroundings where she is, she's gonna become masculine because you're not stepping into your masculine energy. I think there's a lot of guys who, this is kind of another tangent, but there's a lot of guys who think if they could just find a feminine woman that they'll be masculine. That doesn't happen. That doesn't work that way. You as a man have to step into your healthy masculine energy in order for a woman to be feminine around you. Women respond to how men show up. And so for a man to look for a feminine woman to try to make him more masculine is defeating the purpose. You have to step into your healthy masculine energy in order for a woman to be in her feminine. Because if you stay in your feminine energy, being a man-child, being a baby, wanting princess treatment, this and that, even if a woman is feminine, she's either going to just reject you because she doesn't want to deal with you, or if she does get into a relationship with you, she's gonna have to embody her masculine energy because you're not. Women respond to how men show up. Men don't respond to how women show up. And I love when guys push back on that because it's like, that's how men are the leaders. Like a lot of men think that being the leader means like just telling everybody what to do. No, it means you are the one who steps in and embodies the energy that you need to embody for the situation and set the tone. You need to be the leader. If you're a man who's like waiting for a woman to show up a certain way before you show up a certain way, you're not being the leader, she's the leader. If you're a man and being like, well, I'll be masculine when she's feminine, then she's the leader. You're not the leader, she's the leader. If you as a man are like waiting for the woman to do something before you're willing to show up, then she's the leader, you're not being the leader. As a man, what leadership is, what masculine leadership is you showing up as the masculine man, as the masculine energy, the healthy, grounded, stable masculine energy. And when you do that, you're gonna get men who are gonna respect you more because men inherently want to be led by a healthy masculine leader. They want that. They'll choose an unhealthy masculine leader if that's all they have as an option, in the same way that women will. But like everybody wants to follow the leadership of a healthy masculine man. So you as a man have to embody that and show up as that in order for a woman to show up the way that you want her to. You can't force her to, but honestly, most women are gonna show up in a relationship the way that most men would want them to if that man embodies what he needs to in order for her to be that woman. You don't have to force it. You just have to be the leader. which means you embody the healthy masculine, and then she will show up. That is likely the feminine that you've been desiring her to show up as. I have a lot of other videos about this too, so I'm just gonna touch on this briefly, but as I've said in other videos, and I have a lot of videos about wounded feminine energy and addictions, that's one of the reasons why a lot of men are showing up in feminine energy, particularly wounded feminine energy, is addictions, and addictions are rampant. And they're rampant in society in general, but among men, I mean, I would say drugs and alcohol, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm assuming drugs and alcohol are an addiction that probably affects men and women pretty evenly. There are certain addictions, shopping, eating disorders are like addiction adjacent, but those kind of things tend to affect women more than men, although they can affect men. Things like gambling addiction and video game addiction seem to affect men more, and things like that. However, and I have a lot of videos about this, the low estimate that I've heard, so this is like the low number, it's probably higher, of men that are addicted to corn with a capital P is about 76%. And it's probably higher, but we're talking about the vast majority of the male population that is addicted to corn with a capital P. A man cannot be in healthy masculine energy and addicted. So if a man is watching corn, he's not in his masculine energy. He's in his wounded feminine energy, and probably will also have aspects to a wounded masculine energy, because there's a lot of correlations between abuse towards women and corn usage. I actually have videos diving into that deeper, so I'm not going to go into that too much because the video is already pretty long, but that is something to keep in mind. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear this and they don't want to accept this, but you cannot be in a relationship with an addict. You can't do it, because the addict will always be committed to the addiction first. The addiction will always be the primary relationship, and the addiction will always be the thing that the addict is in most service to. So they cannot actually be committed to you in a relationship, because their addiction will always overtake everything. So when you have a situation of men that are overwhelmingly addicted to, and addiction doesn't just affect men. However, when we're speaking about men and men wanting princess treatment or wanting to be a woman in the relationship or things like that, at the end of the day, most men nowadays, the vast majority of men, are addicted to corn. A lot of them are addicted to a lot of other things. I mean, obviously there's drugs and alcohol, video games, gambling, things like that. A lot of men are showing up in relationships and they're wanting the 50-50 and stuff because they're not fully committed to the relationship, because they're always putting something else, primarily their addiction, first. Those are the kind of guys you're going to get that are going to want 50-50, they're going to want princess treatment and things like that, because they're never going to be fully committed to the relationship, because they're already fully committed to an addiction first. And you cannot be in a committed relationship with an addict, because you will never be who they're fully committed to. They will always be committed to their addiction first. I had to learn that lesson the hard way, and I'm sure a lot of other women have too. And I'm not saying that addictions only affect men. The same thing goes for men. Like, you can't be in a committed relationship with a woman who has an addiction. So it goes both ways. But in this situation, if we're talking about men that are, you know, looking for 50-50 and looking for princess treatment, it's probably because he has another commitment that he's serving first before he's serving you. And yes, the masculine is in service. The masculine energy is designed to protect and serve. The masculine is in service to the feminine. The feminine is not in service to the masculine. I know a lot of guys don't like to hear that, but that's just the reality of things. Men who want princess treatment want women to be in service of them. So they're looking to be in the feminine in the relationship. If they would like to be in a relationship with a masculine man, they're more than welcome to be. But they don't get to be seen as the masculine leader in the relationship, but also get 50-50 and also get princess treatment, because they're showing up as the feminine in the relationship. They're not showing up as the masculine. And the masculine is in service to the feminine, not the other way around. The masculine gives, the feminine receives. Whoever is giving the most in the relationship is in the masculine energy. Whoever is receiving the most in the relationship is in the feminine energy. If you as a man are receiving more than you're giving, you're in the feminine in the relationship. You're getting princess treatment. If you're okay with that, that's fine. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, as long as you and your partner are on board with that, but you both better be on board with that. So as a woman, if you're going 50-50 in your relationship, I mean, I wouldn't advise it, but it's your choice. I'm not gonna tell anyone what to do. That man is not fully committed to you if he's willing to go 50-50. And I mean, there's a whole rabbit hole of like 50-50, and you know, people talk about 50-50 in terms of money, but like 50-50, first of all, that's for roommates, that's not for relationships. But you know, 50-50 tends to be about money and who's paying the bills. But 50-50 doesn't tend to go beyond that. There's also the whole tangent I could go on about the idea that men will use the argument that they have to go 50-50 in relationships because men aren't making enough money for the cost of living nowadays. Because we always expect women to step up where men fall short. But it's not like men can take on half of a pregnancy. It's not like men can take on half of the breastfeeding. It's not like most men will actually even take on most of the child care or most of the household care. That goes into a whole whole tangent about weaponizing competence that I'm not going to get into in this video, but that's weaponizing competence, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically when men just keep doing things wrong. So the woman will step in and just be like, I'll just do it myself because he's doing such a bad job, or she won't ask him to do anything anymore because he's doing it badly. That's childlike behavior. That's a man acting like a child. Like, children do that. Like, that's like teenagers will do that, and you have to discipline them and things like that and whatever. If you have a man doing that, you're basically dealing with a child. I talk about all this stuff because I want women to be aware. I want there to be awareness. I know it's frustrating. I find it frustrating. I'm sure a lot of women find it frustrating that as women, there's not a lot we can do about this. Men have to step up and want to do the work on themselves and want to deal with this and fix the problems themselves. I know it's frustrating for women. I mean, my best advice for women out there is to simply not tolerate men that act like this. If it means that you have to stay single longer than you'd like to, my heart goes out to you. I get it. You have to desire the type of relationship that you truly want, or the life that you truly want, more than your fear of being single. I mean, that's where I am right now. I'm not in a relationship. I would love to be in a relationship with a healthy masculine partner. That said, I won't just be in a relationship with any man just for the sake of having a man in my life. Because I've tried just being in a relationship with somebody just to have a relationship, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It's not satisfying. As women, like, we can work on ourselves. We can work on how we show up. We can work on, and I think we should work on ourselves. We should work on how we show up. We should work on being the best versions of ourselves. Any man that can't handle us, who we truly are, and as the best version of how we want to show up in the world, it's just not the man for you. You know, it just is what it is. But we need to, as women, stop convincing ourselves that there's something wrong with us because men aren't showing up the right way, that there's something that we can do differently so men can show up differently, because they have to do the work themselves. I think the latest story about Megan Fox, I hope will break women of this ridiculous narrative that they have in their heads, but I don't know if it will. If you haven't been following, I have a video about Megan Fox. I touch on her and MGK a little bit, but it's a little bit more of an analysis about Megan Fox. If you aren't following, Megan Fox is pregnant with Machine Gun Kelly's baby, and she has announced that they have broken up because she found disturbing evidence on his phone. We don't know, as of filming this, I don't know what that is, but I think we're assuming that there probably was some kind of cheating going on or something like that. There's so many women like, oh my God, how could he fumble Megan Fox? Or how could he cheat on Megan Fox? And I see this all the time online with people being like, oh, he would never fumble like the Megan Fox, or like, how do you screw things up with the Megan Fox? Or like, the minute anybody talks about like Travis Kelce and like, oh, he could never fumble the Taylor Swift, like, people will put the in front of these women's names and put these women up on pedestals, when it's like, you can be the insert any name as a woman. It does not matter. If a man is gonna be a cheater, if he's going to be an addict, if he's going to be a man-child, want princess treatment, or want 50-50, or if a man is going to be that, he's going to be that. It means nothing for you to show up differently. Gorgeous women get cheated on. Intelligent women get into manipulative relationships. You know, successful women, you know, have relationships fall apart and have men destroy them and hurt them and stuff. There's nothing that you can be as a woman to make you immune to men's bad behavior, except being willing to walk away when a man exhibits behavior that you won't tolerate. That's not going to make you immune from it, but it will keep you out of being in a relationship with somebody that's going to mistreat you if you're willing to walk away. It's knowing within yourself that you're okay, that you can leave if a man isn't showing up in a way that you deserve. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you were like the Megan Fox. It doesn't matter if you are the most stunningly beautiful woman in the world. It doesn't matter if you sleep with him every night, or cook all his meals, or have his babies, or clean his house, or, you know, you submit to him, or you, I don't know, do gymnastics in bed, or, you know, none of that stuff matters. If a man is gonna cheat, if a man is going to misbehave, if a man is going to hurt you, he's going to do it. It's him. It's his character, not yours. You cannot cheat-proof your relationship. You can't make yourself immune to men's bad behavior. All you can do is control what you're willing to tolerate and what you will stick around for and what you won't. You can set boundaries in your relationship, but you have to be willing to follow through with those boundaries if those boundaries are crossed. You have to own within yourself that you will be okay if something goes wrong, but you can't control his behavior, and nothing that you do in yourself can control his behavior. He chooses how he shows up. He chooses how much sexual discipline he has. He chooses how committed he is to your relationship. He chooses those things. You can't choose that for him, but you can choose what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate. I mean, my heart goes out to women who are in relationships with men that are hurting them or that aren't satisfying to them. And I know that there's situations where some women feel like they can't just up and leave. I'm not sitting here and telling any woman to do that, because there are some situations where that might not be safe. And I want every woman to be in a safe and healthy situation. But I don't want women to get so caught up in like, oh, if I could just be different, or if I could do things differently. It doesn't work like that. I hope that this video was informative. I hope that this video helped you. I know it's frustrating. I know there's a lot of women out there that are frustrated that there are guys who want princess treatment. They want to go 50-50. They want blah, 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 all those things. And I hope this was informative. And as women, you know how to spot some of the warning signs and red flags. And honestly, women, own what you want. Personally, I don't see any reason for being in a relationship if a man isn't at the very least going to pay all your bills and take the finances off your plate. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to, you can't earn money yourself or anything like that. But like, somebody said something online that I heard this somewhere and I was like, this is amazing. If a man is not solving all your problems, he is your problem. So I hope this video was informative. If you have any thoughts on this topic or any other video suggestions, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you and I love your video suggestions. And honestly, any engagement on this channel really does help boost it in the algorithm so more people can get this message. Make sure you like and subscribe to this video. If you want to learn more about sort of like embodying your healthy feminine energy, check out the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal and my Recovering Pick Me Girl Guided Journal, available on Amazon, along with my courses, Masterclasses. Links are all in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.